good day to you. Welcome to another edition of Food Safety Basics, What You Need to Know. I am so your host, Fumilola Oladokun, and welcome to Series 6. Thank you for the likes, for the shares, for the comments, for the encouragement. Today, we'll be talking about food spoilage. What you need to know. What do you need to know in respect to food spoilage? Have you ever eaten spoiled food before? Have you ever eaten the slimy food? It was just a little bit slimy, but you didn't have a choice. You had to consume it. Have you ever done that before? And so we're starting today with a quote from Remy Ratatouille, which says that if you are what you eat, I would rather eat the good stuff. So if you are what you eat, would you rather eat the good or the spoiled stuff? So let's come with me as we discuss Food Safety Series, what you need to know. So we're talking today about food spoilage, the definitions of food spoilage, what are the signs of food spoilage, and the factors that contribute to food spoilage, and then what happens to us when we consume unsafe food that is already spoiled. And so what exactly is food spoilage? Food spoilage is a change in the physical, chemical properties of a particular food, and that makes it unfit for consumption. So the physical and the chemical properties of the food, when it has changed, and makes it unfit for consumption, it's a trend towards food. So what are the signs that we can see that shows that the food, as the physical or the chemical properties have been changed, and it's tending towards making the food unfit for consumption? So those factors are seen by our organoleptic senses, which means our senses, our physical or the five senses. It makes us to be able to see that something has a change has actually happened to the food. And the first thing we'll notice is the change in color. Sometimes the sign of food spoilage can just be a change in color, like the red meat, where you just find out that the color has changed from the red or wine color to blue-black. It's already showing that something has gone wrong with the physical and chemical properties of the meat. And also we have a change in odor. Or a change in odor also, as soon as you open the food, you know that the odor is different from the normal odor. But sometimes you still go ahead to eat it, to consume it. So a change in odor, slimy or stickiness feeling. When we touch the food, we find out that it's already slimy or it's already sticky. Sometimes we see mold, which is physically present on the food. We see the mold that has grown on the food. And most of the time, we just remove the mold and then we continue to eat. All these foods are unsafe for consumption. When we see the texture of the food can also indicate that the food has actually spoiled. Probably the food is a soft food before, but in this case, when it's already spoiled, it's more softer than normal. So we will have realized that this is food. So we can feel that with our hands, or when we touch it, we see that it's already softer than normal. And when we eventually consume the food, the taste is different from the normal taste of the food. So all this is an indication that the food has actually the physical or chemical properties of the food have been tampered with. And we also see, sometimes we see the evidence of pests in the pest waste in the food. Blown cans is also an indication that the food in the can is already spoiled. Sometimes it's very important for us to note the expiry date on some of this canned product that we're buying, to note that it has not passed the expiry date that has been placed in it, or the safe use date. So we need to check. And then sometimes we even see an evidence of gas production. So all these signs, the odor, change in color, change in the taste, change in the texture, are all signs that something has actually affected the physical and chemical properties of the food. And so what are the factors that contribute to this food spoilage, to these signs that we are seeing? What are the factors? So the first thing we'll be talking about is microorganisms. We have talked so much in earlier series with respect to microorganisms and what it does to make sure that our food is unsafe. So microorganisms are micro. You cannot see them with your eyes, but what you can see is that you can see the effect. And remember, we said pathogenic microorganisms are the food spoiling microorganisms from disease-causing microorganisms, which we have talked about in earlier series. But most of the time, the action of pathogenic microorganisms is not seen physically. It's not seen on it. It just shows it just makes the food to be unsafe. But this food spoilage bacteria or these food spoilage microorganisms, the actions can be seen with all the signs that we have talked about earlier. So we have these food spoilage bacteria, food spoilage microorganisms, the fungi, the mold, that the effect is seen physically, evidently on the food. So these microorganisms, when they are in the right environment, they're in the right temperature, which we have talked about. You know, the temperature that microorganisms thrive, which is between 5 degrees centigrade to 63 degrees centigrade, the microorganisms can multiply rapidly. And so they thrive, and then they begin to work on this food. And before you know it, the physical and the chemical properties of the food have been changed. And also we have, so another thing we'll be talking about, enzymes. Enzymes are natural constituents of the food that aid in the ripening of the food, the vegetables, the fruits. So what this enzyme does is that it aids in the ripening, aids in the change in color and all that. So as this process is going on, we find out that the process of the enzymatic reaction on the food turns it from the good part, and then it begins to move from that state till it is overripened, and then it gets spoiled. So it is just important for us to understand that whether we like it or not, the enzyme is present in the food. So it is the onus on us to be able to do our own work on it, so that we consume the food when it is in a safe zone. Because eventually, if we don't eat those fruits or vegetables or whatever it is, it will eventually, enzymes will continue to work on it, and then it will eventually get spoiled. So enzymes is also one of the factors that affect the food. And then we also have air. When we expose parts, which is also we call oxidation. What it just means is that when we have cut a part of the food is exposed to air, there is a reaction that occurs on the food with respect to the air, and then that part that is exposed begins to change in color. Sometimes you see that it becomes black, sometimes it becomes brown, sometimes it just changes from the natural color, and then before you know it, the reaction has already changed the physical chemical properties of the food, and so that would aid food spoilage. And so, like, sometimes you just cut your apple, within few minutes you see that the color of the exposed part is already changing. Sometimes you even cut your yam, you see that part has changed. So it's just air, and it's just the oxidation reaction that's affected the food. And so that part, you find out that part will eventually get spoiled. If it's sites, all these animals, they also have a way of changing the physical properties of the food by exposing it, eating it, and sometimes even their byproducts, like their waste and all that, they just leave it on the food, so which reacts also to the food and makes it extremely to food spoilage. Is physical damage. Physical damage means that when a particular part of the food is damaged, it exposes that area to the oxidation we talked about, and so even microorganisms invasion, rodents can also invade on that area, and eventually they begin to react with that area that is already exposed or already damaged, and then which eventually begins to spoil the food little by little. Sometimes you see some fruits that have just had a little bit of physical damage. Before you know, you see molds growing on it, microorganisms already working on that area. And so before you know it, they begin to move deep into the food, and they eventually result into food spoiling. Then temperature. You've talked so much about temperature in this series, and it's just important for us to note that temperature works with our safe food. Food safety is all about us knowing the right temperature to leave our food, the right temperature to cook our food, and the right temperature to make sure that our food stays, to make sure that it's still safe for consumption. So temperature, like I said earlier, between 5 to 63 degrees centigrade the bacteria can multiply, microorganisms can multiply. So they can thrive, they can work very well. So it's just important for us to keep them away from that temperature zone. Between from 1 to 4 degrees centigrade or minus 15 degrees centigrade, minus 18 degrees centigrade, whereby we know that the food is in a safe area or in the temperature whereby the microorganisms can not multiply. So we keep them in the temperature above 63 degrees and where we know that the food, the microorganism will can be destroyed. So it's just onus on us to make sure that this temperature does not support the growth of microorganisms. And also time. So it's always important for us to note that time also aids the microorganisms multiplication and their thriving. So when we put them in the room temperature or allow them to thrive in a room temperature, especially like all raw food, our high risk food, you find out that the bacteria will multiply rapidly in the food and aiding it to spoil. Sometimes you see that when you probably buy your meat and or your fish and then you don't put it in the freezer immediately or the fridge immediately, you find out that after some time it begins to show that the unpleasant odor begins to come in and all that. So you are just giving the bacteria a good time and a good environment to thrive and to affect the physical and chemical properties of the food. So what we just need to do is that we need to keep our food from those temperatures. We need to make sure that we reduce the number of the amount of time that our food stays in that safe in the unsafe temperature zone with the food, because if we are not careful, we just react on it and then it will eventually result in the food spoiling. And so what are the effects of consuming work our system for nothing? Because at the end of the day, the food will contain little or no nutrients at all. And so if now we consume it, and then it's also an access for us to begin to have foodborne illness. And we talked in earlier series 5 with respect to foodborne illness and their signs, the signs of foodborne illness, which the first thing is abdominal pain, abdominal cramp. So as soon as you consume spoiled food, is either you begin to feel that abdominal pain or cramp, and then you begin to feel the nauseous, and sometimes you vomiting, diarrhea, fever, headache. All those food poisoning symptoms or foodborne illness are those things that will begin to feel. But if you are lucky that you didn't feel anyhow when you consume the food, probably your immune system is still good. But at the end of the day, you will have consumed a food that can also develop acute infectious diseases with respect to consuming spoiled food. So it's just important for us to keep the food from getting spoiled at the end. Prevention is key, like we talked about in earlier series, in series 5. Prevention is very key. If you want to make sure that we don't want to throw away our food, it's just better we keep the food in the safe zone and make sure that we don't allow the food to get spoiled before we consume it. And so if it's unsafe to consume, I will advise that we throw away. If it's unfit or unsafe to consume, it is better that we throw it. So what can we do? What we have a lot of things that we'll do, which we'll talk about in the next series 7 on food preservation and food preservation methods. Food preservation and food preservation methods, what you need to know. So till we see ourselves in the next series. Thank you for watching. Kindly like, share, comment to your friends, comment on the comment button, share to your friends, and subscribe to the channel for subsequent series on food safety basics, what you need to know. And also we'll also be talking about other types of safety series also in subsequent days. So take care of yourself. Have a nice time. Bye for now. Thank you for watching.